If you've been listening to the Eat More Carbs podcast, you know that Reilly and I are both in our running era. To make sure that we're properly fueled for training, we're using both carbohydrates and 2 2 is an all-natural pre-workout designed to enhance athletic performance through the benefits of New Zealand blackcurrant berries. Studies have shown these berries to increase vasodilation and prime the body to kickstart muscle recovery. These antioxidant-rich berries have a sweet and tangy flavor and will level up your performance and recovery. Use code Reilly for 20% off 20 packs and multi-serve packs online at 2before.com. This is the Eat More Carbs podcast. Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today I'm going to be talking to Reilly all about her journey from being a D1 athlete to becoming a sports dietitian. Before we get into some of the questions for Reilly, what's your high and low?
So my low this week is the weather. It is pea soup outside in Charleston right now. I'm not a fan. I do not know how I was running around playing soccer in this weather, 15 years ago, because it is 85% humidity outside. And I'm not strong enough for it these days.
That's fair, especially when it's already warm out and then you add humidity on top of that. It's just the worst combination.
I think the worst part about it is I have a false sense of hope, because I look at the weather and I'll be like, it's 75 degrees out. And I'm like, yes, I love this temperature. And then it'd be like, but it feels like 98 because we have 85% humidity. So my hopes are just crushed on a daily basis.
And it's hard to do anything when it's just hot and slow and muggy outside.
Well, I think that one of the big issues I have, and I've shared about this on a different podcast, but every time I go outside, I start sweating and then I'm soaking wet and then I have to change my outfit. And it's this whole ordeal. I'm going through 3 or 4 outfits per day.
What about your high?
So my high, some people might think this is a low, but it's not bad because I love food. But something that you and I have talked about on previous podcasts is that I sometimes, because of my mom brain now, I forget my highs and my lows. So I've been writing them down. I noticed that a lot of my highs, if not a majority of my highs, are related to food. And that's not a bad thing because I love food. But I thought it was interesting that a lot of the highs are food related, I tried a new food or a new flavor came out or something related to food. I also love that this is a reminder that food is not just fuel, but it's something for enjoyment. It's clear based off of my high list.
Or even Charlie trying new foods.
She just tried beans.
Did she like them?
Yeah, we did some unsalted refried beans, and I mixed some milk with them to make a paste, and she's like everything that she's had.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you? What's your high and your low?
I'm going to start with my low. This time of year, same as Reilly, kind of with the increase in temperature, when I'm trying to do any type of cardiovascular exercise during this time of year when it is so much hotter out, my heart rate is so much higher than it is in cooler temperatures. And I don't know that much about that correlation, but I know that there is something there and how much harder it feels to exercise, especially for me cardiovascular wise this time of year. So if you're like me and you're kind of getting discouraged by seeing it's harder to run, it's harder to keep up with pace, it's harder to keep up with time and all those things, it might simply have something to do with the environment that you're running in. It's not necessarily that you're making regression in your training or things like that. So it's a low for sure, but at the same time, a good reminder that that doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't progressing in our training and things like that. So that's my low for the week.
That's a good reminder, because I will say that my time is going down because of the weather. Thank you.
Yeah. My high is that we officially know that we are going to be staying in Arizona for a little bit longer. So everything is official. Everybody knows now what's going to be happening with us. And that was mostly to do with my husband's job, but I'm really happy to know, at least for an extended period of time, where we're going to be. I'm really excited not to have to move again this year. I feel like I've moved once every year. That's what that feels like, me being very dramatic. And I'm really excited to be staying in the same place, to not have to kind of pick up and start over again. Very excited, huge high.
Yay! Yeah, that's so exciting.
Thanks. We're excited for sure. Today, we're going to be talking all about your journey from D1 athlete to sports RD. So first off, if you didn't know, Reilly played Division I soccer at NC State. Why soccer?
This is such a great question, because when I first started in sports, I don't think soccer was the move.
Really?
Yeah, I first started off playing soccer. I guess my first memory of me playing soccer was YMCA. There's 20 kids on the field, everybody's running around chasing the soccer ball, and I was not into it. I was not into it, which is kind of crazy because I'm so competitive. The only memory I have is running around in a penny that was way too big for me. And my mom told me the last game of our season, this is so random that I remember this, but the last game of our season, that if I scored 2 goals, please remember that I have not scored any goals the entire season. I don't think I even touched the ball. If I scored 2 goals, that she would buy me a banana split from Dairy Queen. Like, that is my memory with soccer. And I did not score 2 goals. I think I might have touched the ball in like that last game because I was so motivated to get the banana split. I didn't get the banana split because my mom was like, you didn't score 2 goals, but I wasn't going to. I think I just always loved being outside. And as I like started to get older, I would play outside, and soccer I feel like is what everybody plays. And then I slowly got into soccer. When we moved from Minnesota, where I started soccer, to North Carolina, which is now where I claim I'm from, my dad became my coach. I don't know, I just started really liking it, became one of the better kids on the team, and I've always really liked it. And I did try other sports like basketball and volleyball and things like that, which I really liked volleyball, but I'm short, would have never succeeded. I didn't like basketball because they blew the whistle at you too much, I felt like. Yeah, I just like always liked soccer, and then it kind of just like my love for it grew. As soon as I got middle school, high school, I was like, I'm playing in college, like that's what I'm going to do. And my parents like didn't push me or anything. It was all self-motivated.
So you already knew, even in middle school and in high school, that like college soccer, collegiate soccer was your goal. Was it college soccer something that you felt was like just the natural next step, or did you feel like you needed to like work really hard to be a collegiate soccer player?
I think it's super interesting because now working with athletes like these days, when I was playing, there was not a pro option. So the highest you could go was college sport for women. And I've even seen that transition, like working in college sports, like over the last, 5-10 years, where almost every single guy that comes in, like would come into my office, baseball, football, soccer, basketball, they were like, I want to play pro, I want to go to the league. And that was never an option. Like that wasn't something that you did as a women's soccer player. That dialogue is now changing a lot, which is really cool because now we see, these women athletes coming through and being like, I want to play pro in, different sports. So I think for me, I thought I want to play college soccer because that's the highest level. Yes, there was like the US team, but that wasn't happening for me. I wanted to play because I just wanted to be the best because I was competitive. And I knew that college soccer was the way to do that. I also just really loved the sport.
You weren't ready to walk away at the end of high school.
Mm-mm. And I think what's really interesting too is we always talk about how the environment around you like shapes you. And because of the teams I was on, it was almost like an expectation that you were going to play college soccer. Like that's why you were on the team, is like to play soccer in college.
We've talked a lot about your fueling once you got to college, like ice cream at NC State and that being something that was a regular staple for you. But did you feel at the time when you were playing in college that your fueling was adequate to support your training?
No, I think that started early in high school as well, because I don't think I understood the importance of nutrition. Then it started to really affect my play and my body composition. And there was some negative things said to me during that like recruiting process, kind of when I was going through puberty, when I was kind of figuring myself out in high school, all that really fun stuff. I started to develop, really negative behaviors and thoughts about food. I wouldn't say it was like a conscious thing. I would still like eat ice cream, but then I would skip dinner so I could eat the ice cream. So there was a lot of like rules I had made up and a lot of like good foods, bad foods, things like that, where I was probably over fueling if you want to look at it from a calorie perspective, but then I was under fueling for the athletic demand I was putting on my body.
What are some things that you wish you could go back and change about that time in fueling? Like what would be the number one thing?
I really think that I wish I just had more education around it, especially at a younger age, because if I had better education around it and if I had more positive messaging, I think that would have really helped some of my behaviors going forward, because that foundation is just so important. Even if you can kind of change your beliefs at an older age, I feel like there's always going to be some struggles that you inherit from those negative experiences earlier on.
When you graduated, did you know that the next step for you was to become a dietitian? Was that the goal?
I actually wanted to go to medical school, which is kind of funny now because I always joke that if I had gone to medical school, I would probably be in the same position I am now because I have such like a entrepreneurial heart, where I would have probably just started like a medical practice and done something similar to what I'm doing now, but just in a different space. I had wanted to go to medical school because to become a dietitian, you have to take a ton of science classes. When I first went into undergrad, my main priority was to play soccer, and my dad actually suggested nutrition because I liked to eat. But again, right, that kind of goes back to like I loved food, I was eating eating all this food. I didn't understand. I had like, I was stuck in this like weird love-hate relationship with food. I was like, okay, maybe I'll, study nutrition. With nutrition, you have to take all these science classes. I was doing well and I was like achieving in the science classes. So when you start to get good grades in like biologies and chemistries and things like that, people sort of push you that medical route. And there was not really such thing as a sports dietitian yet. So my options were kind of like physical therapy or maybe go orthopedic surgery wise so you could still be around sports. I was like kind of toying between those areas. And then I decided to go the physician route just because, again, I was doing good in the science classes. I started going that route. I took the MCAT. I actually interviewed at a couple of places throughout that journey. And then paired with me tearing my ACL first game of senior year, I really started to understand the importance of nutrition and realized that the medical route wasn't for me. I used to be like, oh, I love nutrition, so I'll just incorporate it into my practice as a physician. And like now I know that's would have never happened. Kind of throughout that journey, basically getting hurt, understanding the importance of nutrition, starting to actually face some of the maybe bad behaviors I had and some of the negative thoughts that I had and seeing how wrong those were. And then coupled with becoming a big girl and having to find a job and figuring out what you really wanted like outside of athletics.
Once you made the choice to become a dietitian versus becoming a physician, you were then getting your master's degree in nutrition and exercise physiology from San Diego State. And then after you had obtained your master's degree is when you chose to apply for the dietetic internship. What did you take away from your master's program? And then as far as like your application process to UNLV to matching with your dietetic internship, what was that time like?
I think during that time it was actually very interesting because we always talk about how like you either get into nutrition because you love food or you fear food. And I think I initially started getting into nutrition because I loved it, but then I also like subconsciously feared it. I think when I started my master's program, a lot of those fears like came to the surface, and that beginning to learn about nutrition and then also being retired from sport, I think was a dangerous combination that maybe fed into some of these more dangerous behaviors. Lots of body dysmorphia, lots of restriction. Kind of through my education, through my own personal journey, I think that's when my perspective on nutrition really changed, because this isn't against anybody or isn't supposed to say anything bad about anybody, but we don't really learn a lot about like positive nutrition in our undergrad or in our DPD work. We don't necessarily learn a lot about sports nutrition in our undergrad work. So a lot of it is about disease states, about the negative sides of food. And I think I really had to do a lot of like self-work to kind of like rework that mindset.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I know that you and I both were interested in UNLV because they said as we applied that there was a sports focus of UNLV's internship. They gave you as much sports rotations as they possibly could, but that was still very limited and shallowed in comparison to the amount of work that we were doing in a hospital where you're doing a lot of medical management of disease through nutrition, I guess is the best way to say that, where we're kind of playing like, okay, this has happened. Now what do we do with food versus how can we use food in a positive way to enhance performance, which I'm thankful that we did have the experience that we did, which included meeting one another, but also to be able to have some exposure to sports nutrition during our internship, because a lot of people don't get that experience in their internship. But you had a lot of like sports nutrition experience before the internship. You were working with the Olympic team in Southern California and kind of doing a couple other things there. Would you say that that's really where your idea for becoming a sports dietitian came from? Or was it like somewhere along the way you decided that being in sports and coupling those things together was the route you wanted to take?
I feel like it was almost a perfect storm because in 2014, when I graduated from undergrad, that's when the deregulation of feeding happened in the NCAA. And if people are not familiar with a deregulation of feeding, but this, air quotes, I'm very simplifying legislation, but it allowed universities to spend as much money as they wanted, again, air quotes, wanted, could, on feeding their student athletes. When this legislation passed, it really helped the sports dietitian career path expand, because now universities were spending money on feeding their athletes and they needed people to help them do that. Therefore, sports dietitians really came into play here. That wasn't really an option. Like, we had a sports dietitian who was awesome at NC State, but she was very limited. She had all these teams. We're also really restricted on like what she could provide us. There was a protein limitation on certain things. They couldn't provide protein powder. You had to I can't remember what it was, but I believe the legislation was like you could only provide products that were less than 30% protein by weight, because then it was like a supplement and you have to be really careful about like, you have to even the playing field. She was really limited on what she could do. So there wasn't a lot of interest in the sports nutrition space and becoming a sports dietitian before this like deregulation of feeding. So this deregulation of feeding happened, and then all these places started to bring awareness to sports nutrition, and they needed people to help them out, like with interns and things like that. And throughout that process, that's when I really realized that like this is where I was meant to be.
At the time you and I met was after you had already matched to UNLV. Obviously, we've talked about before, we were interns at the same hospital. We spent so much time together. But the thing you would always say was when people would ask you, what do you want to do with your career? What do you want to do as a dietitian? And you would say, I want to be a sports dietitian and I want to make athletes big and strong. Like, I will never forget that that's always been like kind of your motto when you approached sports nutrition. And about halfway through our internship, you were one of the very first interns in our cohort to receive a job offer. Can you talk a little bit about that and like what you had to do during that time to set yourself into that position? Because that was one of the things that you did really well. And that was one of the things that I didn't do as well, was set myself up for success like during the internship with a potential job outside of it. Obviously, like my career interest at the time wasn't necessarily sports, but what did you do to make sure that that was an option for you at the end of the internship?
This is actually really interesting, and I want to come back to this because I think it's really interesting how we took very different approaches to the internship, because I actually used to really be jealous of you because I thought it was such a great approach that you took, because you came in and I remember you being like, I want to try everything because I don't necessarily know exactly what I want to do. So you came in with a much more open mind than I did, because I came in and I was like, everybody get out of my way. On being a sports dietitian. I matched at UNLV because it's like one of the shortest internships possible. I don't have any clinical experience. I need clinical experience, so now I can go work in sports. And I was kind of narrow-minded with that. And I also, it worked out, but I just want to give you like props, because I remember being like, dang, maybe I should take her approach.
I think that's really interesting because there are definitely pros and cons to each. Because from my perspective, I was like, oh shoot, I wish I had the ability to walk into a rotation and tell that preceptor, like, this is what I want to do. I want to spend extra time here. I want to have, my elective rotation here and all those things. But at the same time, there is benefit to not knowing exactly what you want to do, because then you can walk into every single rotation in the mindset of, is this what I want to do with my career? And like, give it everything you've got to figure out if it's what you really like. And I didn't have a ton of like exposure to a lot of different things, even if you are already to be walking into a opportunity, whether that be the actual internship or not. Just like view it as a potential for what your life could look like, and like try to envision yourself as best you can, like in that position, if you are in a situation more similar to mine. So even if you don't have everything as figured out as Reilly.
I think I was like so gung-ho on it though, because I'm a little bit, obviously, like I'm a little bit older than you. Like that's not a bad thing. That's just facts. So I had spent a year trying to figure my like ish out, and I knew I was passionate about sports nutrition because so many people told me that I was never going to become a sports dietitian, where especially like in my master's program and things like that, people are like, you like electrolytes, like you should work in renal. Like not many people are become sports dietitians. And I think I had such a chip on my shoulder of like, I'm going to prove you all wrong. So I was like, this is what I want to do with that. And kind of going back to your original question before I vented and went tangent wise, I had a lot of experience with like volunteer work, and I tried to do whatever I could to get a leg up, try to get as much experience as I could, because especially in the sports world, it's super, super small. Everybody knows each other. Getting experience is going to help differentiate you from somebody else who's just, doing well in their science classes. Another thing too is because I had experience in different areas, then it really reiterated and reinforced where I wanted to work in sports nutrition, because a lot of the time we think that we want to work in a certain area of sports nutrition, and then we do not have experience in it, and we jump into it and we're shocked by what it actually entails. So my recommendation would be making sure that you're getting experience in different areas of sports nutrition, because you don't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into. It's really important to get additional like feedback, basically.
What is your advice, like final pieces of advice for someone who wants to become a sports dietitian?
I think there's two big things here. One of them probably is actually, they might be both unpopular opinions, but the first one is reiterating the importance of getting experience, trying out different areas. I hear this all the time from interns who are like, I want to work pro sports. Great, let's do it. If you're working pro sports, you can't tell me that you only want to work 40 hours a week. You can't tell me that you want to work 9 to 5. You can't tell me that you want to have your weekends off, because you're going to be working those weekends. You're going to be working off hours. If you come and tell me, I like to do education and team talks, it's probably not happening at the pro level. And I think what so many people do is they're too focused on maybe the type of athlete that they want to work with, and they should be focused on the environment that they want to work in. So figuring out what's important to you, like your why, and then looking at jobs, not just looking at like the type of athlete or the team or things like that, because I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is they get too tunnel visioned on trying to work with an athlete at a certain level.
I think that's such great advice, because it's really easy to get caught up in the glamour of the idea of working for a specific team, especially if it's one that you have, maybe followed for a while, or you find they're fueling like a great program or whatever it is, but really thinking about like the environment and whether or not that fits your life.
And the second one is going to be kind of controversial, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I think it needs to be said. I'm actually kind of nervous saying this, but if you're somebody that is going into nutrition because you fear food, you have to solve your own issues first before you can help other people. If you feel like you're struggling with nutrition, struggling with body image, you really have to make sure that you do the inner work first before you can help other people, because you do not want to be projecting onto other individuals. And I feel like that's a little bit of a hard and harsh take, but I had to go through that journey, and I can tell you that if I was trying to help people 10 years ago when I was not in a good space, I would have not been providing quality care. And I think that is, again, something that you have to consider if you want to work in nutrition.
I think that would go for probably all areas of nutrition.
And it's not like you have to be completely healed, right? Like there's hard days, there's, things like that. You cannot project your problems onto your clients or your athletes.
I think there are so many great things that you've just shared as far as your journey, not only as a D1 athlete, but also your journey to becoming a sports dietitian. I feel like it's really common and really popular for those who have been previously involved in sports to have some type of a career that's in some way connected with sports, whether that be nutrition or something like physical therapy, or even a physician who works as, a team doc, sports doc, something along those lines. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think it's incredibly valuable just to talk about your journey, because there are so many people who are interested, not just about your background as a D1 athlete, but also like what's it take to become a sports dietitian. If you have additional questions for Reilly and I, especially about becoming a dietitian, becoming a sports RD, you can leave them below, or you can find us online. We're at the More Carbs Podcast. You can find Reilly on Instagram at reilly.beatty.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.